Hello and welcome to the Nonprofit Leadership Center's virtual training space, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Charlie Imbergamo, Director of Strategic Programs at NLC. We have some of our NLC teammates on with us today. So on behalf of all of us, we'd like to welcome you, and we're delighted that you're with us today as we continue our mission to develop and connect nonprofit leaders in this virtual space from far and wide. To recognize you and the organizations and communities that you represent, would you please find the chat box and type the name of your organization and the location in the chat right now? And as we see the names of your organizations pop into the feed, allow us a moment to celebrate you and the impact that you're having in the communities in which we serve. Partners and membership organizations can often elevate our voices and our missions and the great work that we do in our communities. We, as a member of the Florida Nonprofit Alliance, know that firsthand. FNA exists to be the state's collective voice, respected advocate, effective connector, and powerful mobilizer for the nonprofit sector. For this engaging session, we'll focus on understanding the why and how donors give in Florida, Giving in Florida research targeted to some of our regional areas within Tampa Bay. We are delighted to be joined today by Leah McDermott, the program manager for Florida Nonprofit Alliance. Leah has been working and volunteering in the nonprofit sector for 20 years, specializing in helping organizations grow their capacity to meet their mission through training, leadership and development, strategic thinking and planning, research and processes, and procedural implementation, something near and dear to the Nonprofit Leadership Center's heart, as we do that as well. Leah conducts and facilitates training on various topics, including board governance and engagement, advocacy, starting nonprofit organizations, and trends in our sector. She's served on many boards, and she's worked at the Nonprofit Center of Northeast Florida, American Cancer Society, the Alliance for World-Class Education, and many other nonprofit consulting in many other nonprofit consulting capacities. Moderating our session today is our teammate, Karina Kletter, Nonprofit Leadership Center's Program Associate. Karina has been an awesome force in driving this work and in providing an accessible virtual experience for our participants. Very passionate about the work that we do and committed to continue that work. Karina is here to help us provide quality resources, and she will take us through some rules of the road for today's session. Karina.
Thank you, Charlie. So I'm just going to explain a few of the logistics of today's call. To minimize background noise and distractions, all lines will be muted for the duration of the webinar. The session is being recorded and will be available on our website in the next few days. You may have noticed that we have live captions enabled, which is a Zoom accessibility feature. If you find them distracting, or if you would like to see them but don't see them yet, you can enable or disable them by going to the bottom of your Zoom screen and clicking on the icon that says CC Live Transcript. Once you click that, click the button that says Disable Auto Transcription or Enable Auto Transcription. We warmly welcome your questions. Please type them in the chat box as they come up for you, and we'll take 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for Leah to answer as many as we're able to get to. If you haven't found the chat box yet, go to the settings at the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on chat. And if you haven't already, please share the name of your organization in the chat box. We're so delighted to have Leah with us today and look forward to a great informative webinar. On to you, Leah.
Great, thank you, Charlie and Karina. I'm really happy to be here today. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. All right, does that look okay? Good, okay, excellent. Well, good afternoon again, everyone. I love seeing all of your organization names and locations in the chat. Thanks for sharing those. And as Karina said, please do feel free to share questions as we go through. There's lots of data and numbers in here today, so sometimes getting those questions out as soon as you have them is helpful. And that way we don't miss any as we go through the hour here we have together today. As Charlie said, my name is Leah McDermott. I'm the program manager for Florida Nonprofit Alliance. He also already shared our mission with you all. If you're not familiar with us, the best place to start is on our website, flnonprofits.org. We are the statewide association for nonprofits in Florida. We spend a lot of our time on advocacy, lobbying, public policy, along with research and a few other statewide resources that help nonprofits across the state of Florida. We're also a member of the National Council of Nonprofits, which not only gives us our boots on the ground lobbying in Washington, D.C. on behalf of the sector, but it also connects us with the 44 other state associations around the country so that we can share out all the great work that's happening here and also learn from other states. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about us, the best place to start is by subscribing to our newsletter. It's free, comes out once a month, gives you a good overview of what we do, especially in the public policy and advocacy realm. So you can subscribe to that at our website. We are a membership organization, and we appreciate all the support we get from our members, including those of you on the call today who are members. I saw a few of you come in, and that does include the Nonprofit Leadership Center, as Charlie mentioned. And we're super fortunate that Emily Benham, the CEO, is also a member of our board. So really happy to have this great partnership between us and the Nonprofit Leadership Center. We offer a range of membership benefits. If you are interested in learning more about that, our website is a great place to check that out. We also have a tremendous amount of resources on our website that are accessible to anybody. Our body of research is there, which consists of economic impact of nonprofits across the state, the effects that COVID-19 has had on nonprofits in Florida, compensation and benefits information, and then what we're talking about today, which is individual giving in Florida. A number of general advocacy resources, everything from how to help your board learn more about advocacy to election resources or how to access American Rescue Plan Act funding. And we also have some tools like our legal compliance checklist for nonprofits and our statewide job bank. We also provide a number of workshops and trainings ourselves on different topics. So if you're interested in any of these, I think all the ones on the screen are free and open to anyone. And so if you have staff or board members that might be interested in learning a little bit more about advocacy, what that looks like for the sector, check out Advocacy 101 or Setting a Policy Agenda coming up this summer. So let's move into our topic for today, the Giving in Florida research. This partnership was joint between Florida Nonprofit Alliance, the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, and the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. We really think this is a milestone achievement because this study marks the first information that we have about giving in 2021. It's the first ever household study of giving in Florida. We're hopefully coming out of this global pandemic or seeing different versions of this global pandemic evolve. An economic crisis seems to be looming over us, national racial justice movement, and more national and international events that are affecting our work. And through all of that, we've seen levels of giving and generosity of Americans at all different levels, giving their time, their money, and their voices on causes reaching from climate, racial justice to health equity. You all know Florida is one of the biggest states in the country by population and also one of the most diverse. So it plays a pivotal role in political cycles, and it matters to giving. Many philanthropic institutions are watching to see what happens in our state to help make their decisions or to see the trends that are happening across the country. So today we're going to look at some of those and talk about what's happening now with charitable giving in Florida and what we think is important to know as we move into the future. I do want to say a quick thank you to our advisory council. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to put this research together. They helped us formulate the questions at the front end, take a look at the data at the back end, and pull out those key findings that we want to share with you today, including from the Tampa Bay region, Ashley Dietz, who's the CEO of the Florida Philanthropic Network. So really happy to have all of the expertise from our advisory council in putting this together. The motivation for this research came from knowing that timely and accurate information on who's giving to you, why they're giving, and what they give to is really valuable to our sector. There's many thoughts, many myths out there about what philanthropy in Florida looks like. Things like we're not so generous, or that snowbirds come down here, they're only giving their money where they're from and not in our states ourselves, or that Florida has low volunteer rates. So we really wanted to take a look at what citizen philanthropy looked like and be able to leverage that as we move forward. We did some previous research in individual charitable giving that gave us a picture as of 2018. And at that point, the bulk of charitable giving in Florida was coming from a relatively small group of wealthier donors, mostly in South Florida, rather than from a cross-section of Floridians, as was the case 15 years before that. The number of individual donors had decreased in all but 10 counties across the state, but we didn't have information at the household level about what decisions people were making in their charitable giving. And we didn't know how the pandemic had affected both giving and volunteering. So we hope the research that we're going to share today will prompt you to think about your organization's future and will spur some discussions within and among nonprofits, especially in the Tampa Bay area. Specifically, are there any opportunities here to really innovate and do things differently based on what Floridians are telling us? Where should we maintain the status quo of what we're already doing? And how do we use this research to help inform that decision-making to make really good decisions? Data for this report is based on a survey of Floridian households with a special sample of high net worth households, which we defined as those with an annual income of at least $200,000 and or net assets of $1 million, excluding their primary residence. The survey was fielded in January of this year and captured responses about giving, volunteering, and other charitable activities in the calendar year of 2021. The total participating number of households was 1,444. And then the results were weighted for population and income and wealth differences. So this first section, we're going to take a look at the big picture findings from the research. And don't forget, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to drop those into the chat. This slide is one of the most important findings from the research and hopefully provides some inspiration and optimism about our state. 7 out of 10 households in Florida reported giving to charitable organizations in 2021. We think that the last few years has really created a unique environment where Floridians are more aware of their neighbors and their needs than maybe they were in the past, or have the ability to kind of see what's happening even at the street level, what the needs are out there. The number one cause to contribute to in Florida is basic needs. Religious congregations is number 2. And then the third cause was environment and animals, which is actually a little bit of a surprise. That's not something that we see happen at the national level. With 7 out of 10 households giving donations, we feel like we can pretty safely debunk the myth that Floridians are not generous. We also took a look at the amounts of charitable dollars and which causes got the most. The largest single sector recipient is the religious sector, which is not a surprise to any of us. That includes congregations of all types, churches, mosques, synagogues of all different sizes, all different locations. This could maybe provide some opportunities for the rest of the nonprofit sector to really think about how we're partnering with our religious colleagues and what that might look like going forward. Basic needs was the second, followed by education. Once again, similar to what we see at the national level in both the Giving USA and the Philanthropic Panel Study. Because we partnered with Indiana University, we had the ability to kind of compare those research because they also own that body of work for the national numbers. What stands out here is the combined purposes subsector, comprised of umbrella organizations like United Way, United Jewish Services, makes up about 10% of giving in our state. And we did see that those organizations were really important over the last couple of years, especially in pandemic response. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase that all politics is local, and we're seeing that that also applies to charitable giving. When we look at where dollars tended to go during the pandemic, about 2/3 of charitable dollars donated by Floridians went to Florida nonprofits. About half of that was given within the same county. So we can see that local donors are supporting local charities, and a sizable chunk of charitable dollars are staying inside of the state. Donors look like they're seeking to give locally, and maybe have had a chance over the past couple of years to get to know some nonprofits that are in their area. And this is a momentum that Florida nonprofits can and absolutely should be taking advantage of. Also, very encouragingly, over half of Florida households reported volunteering in 2021, 56% to be exact. For general households, food-based volunteering opportunities like collecting, preparing, distributing food were one of the most popular activities, followed by fundraising and tutoring or teaching. More than 1/3 of households also indicated they volunteered for other activities that we didn't specify on the survey. And for high net worth households, the numbers are even higher. They volunteer at rates over 8 and 10. During the pandemic, we saw nonprofits pivot to offering online volunteer experiences, and there's some possibility to continue to grow those opportunities, even as people get more comfortable with being back in person. So one of the things that came out of this study that we're very interested in is this notion of all-in giving, that traditionally we've thought about charitable giving as the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasure. But this study made a very specific effort to really understand all of the ways in which Floridians are giving. We have a lot of diversity of all different kinds in our state. We took a look at all of those different subcategories: race, age, income level, location, ethnicity, religious activity. A large percentage, 87% of Floridians, are giving informally. Over half of households reported giving money directly to people in need who they know personally within Florida, or helping those in need that they know personally anywhere else in the country. This also includes giving through crowdfunding campaigns or other types of technology platforms, and donating goods, in-kind donations. During the pandemic, individuals were responding to appeals on Twitter, on Nextdoor, on Facebook, and neighborhoods and community members who were in need, that were expressing the needs that they had. This has always been the case, but technology in the pandemic made it more accessible, more important for people to give in that way. And so we wanted to make sure we were capturing this type of giving as well. This is another opportunity for nonprofits who can partner with those mutual aid networks and neighborhood organizations and individuals who are leading these efforts on a variety of issues, to really think about how we talk about giving, how we give people opportunities to interact, and deal with some of the major issues that have come to light over the past couple of years. So I'll take a quick break right now. Karina, I haven't been watching the chat. Are there any questions about this specific data that have come up so far?
I have not seen any questions come through yet. Everybody, feel free to leave your questions in the chat box for Leah, and I will share them with her.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll keep going and we'll grab your questions as soon as they come in. So let's take a deeper dive into who the state's donors are. We're covering some highlights here today, but do know that the full report is almost 50 pages long, has a lot of information in it that I'm not going to touch on. So if you do want to dig down more into the data, that's a great place to check, and I'll share the link with you at the end here of how to access the full report. We'll also be sharing these slides with you afterwards, so you can go back and see them. So Florida donors tend to be older, they tend to be religiously affiliated, and they tend to have higher levels of education and income, which is in line with what we see with donors across the country. But as a sector, we also need to be thinking about how we engage those younger donors, especially as we think about building a pipeline of donors for the future. So this next section, we're going to share a little bit about what we know on what younger and older donors are telling us, as well as the high net worth households. When we look at current donors and why they give, one element that stands out quite strongly from the research is that donors overwhelmingly reported altruistic values were most important factor when making charitable giving decisions. Over 8 in 10 donors reported that they give because they feel compassion towards people in need. Social networks and factors also matter. People do what their friends do, and nearly half of donors reported having friends that donate to charities as a motivation for donating. Over 35% of donors reported giving to charities that make them feel needed, right? So having that personal connection with the donors. And high net worth households were more likely to say they were motivated by tax incentives than quote unquote regular households were. And they're even more influenced by their friends than the general population. So if you have a high net worth donor in your mix, getting them to engage their friends is probably going to be a fairly successful technique for you. One data point that we were really curious about was not only why they chose to give to nonprofits, but also why they stopped giving. The good news here is that many of the reasons selected in this study are factors that nonprofits have some control over, like acknowledgement around giving, over solicitation, and communicating effectiveness. The top 2 preventable reasons why respondents reported stopping giving was, number 1, mismanagement of donations, which we all know is probably not true, but the perception is there enough that we need to still be fighting that. And the second one is spending too much on administration and or fundraising, the old overhead conversation, right? So once again, not new, also probably not super true, but something that we really need to be able to address as a sector, that we need to really work together to make sure that we're educating donors about how we spend our money and why that makes our missions more effective in the community. Other reasons for stopping giving included a change in the issues that donors cared about, receiving too many requests from charities to donate, and stopping involvement with that particular organization. We looked not only at the reasons for giving, but what causes and issues also mattered to donors. In recent years, we have seen an increase in issue-based giving, meaning that donors are responding to issues that they care most about with their dollars and their time. Florida has some of the highest levels of income inequality in the country, and we're very concerned about that. You can see over 4 in 10 Floridians identified poverty or income inequality as the issue they cared most about. Nearly the same percentage of respondents reported giving to basic needs charitable organizations, which seems to be demonstrating they are interested in putting their money where their mouth is, right? What they care most about is where they're donating. The environment is also an especially important cause to Floridians. It was the third cause of the state. Giving to environment and animals was one of the top 3 most common charitable causes that Floridians gave to. Young people under 40 were more likely to give to environment and animals organizations than those over 65. And climate change was ranked as the 3rd most important issue, followed by animal rights at 4th. And once again, that seems to be a little bit unique to Florida, not something that we see across the country. And in addition to all the pandemic changes we've been looking at for the past couple of years, we also all know that the summer of 2020 seemed to be kind of a turning point for a racial and social justice movement in our country. This data is one of the first real-time measures of how people are responding to that with their money and with their volunteer time. In 2021, over 1 in 4 Floridians gave to racial justice causes, and donors gave an average amount of $1,300 to racial justice causes. Now, this is a little bit complex to try to track and categorize because there isn't just one set of organizations who's doing racial justice work. And in fact, it's not a category that the IRS or the National Taxonomy of Exempt Entities even uses. So you can have a lot of different types of mission and still be doing racial justice work. So we asked in 3 ways. The most common way that people said they were giving to racial justice causes was giving directly to individuals, 13% said that, followed by giving to established nonprofits, 12%, and then grassroots organizations came in as the 3rd most popular way, 11% they said they were doing that. Younger and more diverse donors have a higher likelihood of giving to racial and social justice causes. And unlike other types of giving, there is not a correlation between a higher level of education or increased income. So that does make it different than other types of giving that we see. One of the demographic analysis in our research was the age divide. A big takeaway from this section, once again, probably not a surprise to you all, but one size solicitation does not fit all, especially when we look at the generational differences of what people expect. When we look at Floridians who are 65 and older, they are more likely to give to formal charities. They tend to give more charitable dollars in their local communities. They tend to give for feelings of compassion and tend to have higher levels of trust. However, when we peel back that concern about overhead expenses, it tends to be those in this category, 65 and older, who are most concerned about that. For Floridians who are 40 and under, they are much more likely to volunteer their time and to be drawn to the environment and animal causes. Their reasons for stopping giving are different too. I think this is really fascinating. A significantly larger share of Floridians 40 and under said they stopped giving because the organization did not recognize or acknowledge their contributions. Now, there could be some connection there, and that I'm assuming a lot of people 40 and under tend to give smaller gifts. And so maybe we don't recognize those as much as we do the larger gifts in the sector. We all have limitations on our capacity as well. But something to think about if we want to grow those younger donors over time is really understanding what their expectations around recognition and acknowledgement are. They were also more likely to stop giving because they had started to give to different issues, demonstrating maybe some more fluidity and less traditional loyalty to causes than we see in other generations. They also tell us they prefer to give online or through an app or respond to a crowdfunding campaign more often than the 65 and older population. So let's look a little bit more closely at that. One of the takeaways I think we get from this is that technology has been a big disruptor in charitable giving and probably will continue to do so. Younger donors are far more likely to be giving online, and they prefer the opportunity, to do their charitable gifts that way. That's in pretty sharp contrast to more traditional, maybe older donors who prefer to give in traditional methods. Younger donors are far more likely to give on an organization's website or through a crowdfunding campaign. They express an interest in having access to those digital tools. So every nonprofit may not be providing those opportunities just yet. And it is about making giving more accessible online, but it could also include things like volunteering, events, advocacy opportunities. So as this technology becomes more accessible, we need to figure out how to make this, not make this a barrier for nonprofits, but allow this to be another way that we are connecting with our community. High net worth households, remember we define this as income over $200,000 or net assets of at least 1 million, have some distinct giving patterns as well. They are likely to give a larger share of their giving to organizations outside of Florida, but still within the United States. Nearly 3/4 have a will with a charitable provision, and 4 out of 10 high net worth households named a charity in Florida in their will. So if you're not doing planned giving yet at your organization, this is another area that's maybe a potential growth opportunity for you. High net worth households participate in informal giving at high rates as well. 83% of respondents reported giving money to informal causes compared to 76% of the general population. Remember, we define that as giving money to individuals or in-kind donations. So I'm going to take another quick pause here. Any questions on this section on donors or anything that you've heard so far that I can answer?
Looks like we just got a question in the chat box here, Leah, from Charlie. Are there statistics for younger generations and estate planning?
There is. There's a lot in the full report, and at the very end, I'm going to cover a few of these. So I'm just going to ask you to hold on for just a little bit longer, and we'll take a look at some of that. But yes, some very interesting statistics that, sort of the traditional thinking about who includes nonprofits in their wills doesn't necessarily look the same as we look at younger donors. So we'll take a look at that in just a minute. It's a great question. Okay, great. Well, I'll keep going. Keep thinking of your questions, drop them in, and we'll make sure we get to them. So we also know that Florida is a very diverse state. It can be a very complex state when it comes to regional and demographic differences. There's different wealth and economic disparities across the state, different population sizes, number of nonprofits. So we did spend some time trying to interpret the regional differences that we saw. We'll take a look at some of those right now. We divided the state into 8 regions for this report. And when we did that, Southeast Florida has the largest share of charitable giving. That's probably not a surprise, once again, to anyone on the call. They also have more nonprofits than any other region, and they have higher levels of income and wealth. This also lines up with research we've done in the past that found that South Florida represents a large share of total giving. Southwest, especially Collier County, and Southeast Florida combined represent nearly 40% of total giving dollars. However, the good news for all of us, no matter where we live in the state, is that according to the Florida Chamber of Commerce, we have 1,000 new residents arriving in Florida each day. And when we look at where they're settling, they're not just going to Southeast Florida, they're going all over the place. And I know that you all have felt that in the Tampa Bay area for sure. So our state is changing, and nonprofits need to be ready to take advantage of, not take advantage, but bring in these new residents and connect them with your nonprofit, with the services you're providing and the needs of the community to make sure that they feel like giving their time, talent, treasure is the right thing to do in their new home. Central West region, which is where much of the Tampa Bay area is in this report, the giving for this region makes up about 11% of giving across the state. When we look at where dollars are being given and to what extent they're staying local, it's a little bit more equitable across all the regions, meaning once again that cultivating your local donors is likely going to be the best strategy for your organization. Again, Southeast Florida represents the largest share of giving to local charities, and we define that as giving to charities in the same county in which the donor lives. But you can see here, Northeast Florida and Central Florida had similar percentage shares when it came to giving to local organizations. Southwest Florida, on the other hand, just south of you all, saw the biggest drop from share of charitable giving to share of local giving, meaning that probably more dollars in that region are going outside of the state than in any other region. And I see the question coming in about the breakdown of giving by county. We don't have the county level data for each of the 67 counties. That would have been an extremely expensive report to do. But we do have some information on some counties, and one of those is Hillsborough. So today we're going to take a look at the Central West region in more detail. We'll take a look at Hillsborough County specifically. And then the Nonprofit Leadership Center asked us to go back and ask our researchers for a data pull of the 5-county region that they use to define Tampa Bay. So we'll also take a look at that, the information we have on that. So you'll get kind of 3 versions of regional information to look at today. So for this research, the counties included in the Central West region are Citrus, DeSoto, Hernando, Hillsborough, Manatee, Pasco, Pinellas, and Sarasota. So when we talk about the Central West region, those are the counties included. As I mentioned, NLC asked us to take a look at what Hernando, Hillsborough, Pasco, Pinellas, and Polk data could tell us, that 5-county poll. And because we had such a good response from Hillsborough County in the general report, we can also take a look at what that data tells us at the county level for those of you who are in Hillsborough County or mostly serving Hillsborough County. So once again, good news is that overall the data shows us that people living in the Tampa Bay area are generous with their time and their dollars. But you'll see in just a minute, there's maybe some room here to grow giving in several different ways. So we'll take a look at that. So key findings for the region overall, that I think 8-county region that I just showed you. Giving in Central West Florida makes up 11% of all giving in Florida and 11% of local giving in the state. The average amount given by households in Central West Florida, these are all households, is $1,126. That is the lowest out of all the regions in the state. But we're going to take a look at that more closely in just a minute and give you the good news of that in just a second. Rates of all kinds of giving, so giving to charitable organizations, volunteering, informal giving, and racial justice giving are slightly below what we see at the state average. And percentage of local giving by individuals, so rather than dollar amounts that we just looked at across the state, but the number of people who say they're giving locally is actually highest in this region out of all the regions in the state. So 53% of individuals say they are giving locally, 73% say they are giving within the state of Florida. So even more backup here for you all to really concentrate on that local giving. Key findings for the Tampa Bay region overall, the 5-county region. Charitable giving is at 67%, slightly below both the state and the region averages. Volunteering, informal, and racial justice giving are below the state averages, but slightly higher than the region overall. So that larger county area, it is slightly better for the 5-county poll. And key findings for Hillsborough County. So overall, giving to charitable organizations is actually lowest in Hillsborough County, just barely out of the 3 Tampa Bay data sets that we have. 66% of individual or of households are giving to charitable organizations. Informal giving in Hillsborough is significantly lower than the state overall and just a little bit lower than the regions. But racial justice giving in Hillsborough is significantly higher than the regions and on par with the state at 26%. So there are some differences here depending on where you are in your region. Almost half of the giving in Hillsborough County stayed in the county, so a little bit lower than what we saw for the region overall, but remember your region numbers are very high across the state, so still very strong numbers here. More than 2/3 of giving in Hillsborough County stayed in the state. So, you know, lots of good information, once again, kind of reinforcing this idea that all giving is local in some ways. So here you can see the comparison. And once again, we'll share these slides out with you. I know it's hard to take in all the numbers at one time. But in Central West Florida, rates of all kinds of giving, the 4 ones that we measure here, are slightly below the state averages, but not too much. Charitable giving incidence, that's a number of people giving to charities, is actually third out of the 8 regions in the state. This, combined with a smaller average amount of donations made, tells us that looks like more people are giving in the region, but they might be giving smaller gifts than on average across the state. So high participation rate, maybe not as high of a dollar amount per household that we see. Volunteering rates are the lowest in the state, however. So some opportunities here maybe to continue to talk about and grow volunteering opportunities and access to volunteering opportunities. It's still more than half of the residents in this region that are volunteering. So just, some opportunities as we kind of look comparatively of what are available for this region. Informal giving rates are also fairly low, 7th out of the 8 regions in the state, which just means, once again, fewer people are giving directly to individuals or giving in kind. They're more likely to be giving to charities, good news for a lot of us on this call, than doing some of the informal giving that we see in other areas of the state. In the Tampa Bay, the 5-county region, volunteering rates are slightly higher than the region overall, but still a little bit below the state averages. And in Hillsborough County, here you can see that uptick in racial justice giving, which puts it on par with the state averages and makes it higher than the region or the 5-county poll that we did. However, informal giving continues to kind of drop. So Hillsborough County is not as engaged with giving to individuals or in-kind donations, maybe as some of the other areas of the state that we see. So when we look at where the money is going, what causes they're going to, for Central West Florida region, the basic needs category is the highest at 27%, followed by religion at 18%. Giving to religion, I think fascinatingly, in this region is the lowest in the state. So out of the 8 regions, Central Florida gives the least amount to religion, even though it's still the second highest amount overall in the pie chart, not as big of an area of giving as in other parts of the state. Environmental giving, which you can see on your pie chart here, is about 15%. That's the highest of any region to give to that category. Youth giving also is the highest in the state in this particular region compared to all the rest. The 2 least popular causes are arts and international. Giving to international causes is actually the lowest out of all the regions in the state here. So definitely not something that is as much of a priority in this region as in some of the other regions. And then we took a look at what Hillsborough County told us. So this is slightly different from what we see in the region overall. Here, the number 1 cause was religion at 24%. So you can see that difference there. The region overall, 18%, but in Hillsborough County, it goes up to 24%, followed by basic needs at 22%. And once again, international and the arts are the least popular causes to give to. When we asked the question about issues, Hillsborough County residents told us that they also thought poverty, income inequality was the top issue. Health was the second, and then the third was disaster relief and recovery, which I think speaks very much to the geography that you all are situated in and the amount of hurricanes and hurricane threats that you've had over the past recent years. Animal rights and civil rights were also very important to Hillsborough residents, more than the state overall. So I see a couple questions. Does environment include animals? In the pie chart, it does, yes. Some of the, like in the issues, we asked them as 2 separate pieces, but in this pie chart that you're looking at, environment does include animals. The other question was about combined purposes. Those are nonprofits that collect money and redistribute it to lots of different types of causes. So like your United Way, United Jewish Services, those types of things are combined purposes. Great question about what category affordable housing is in. So this was a survey where we asked people to define their giving on their own. So things like affordable housing is mostly in basic needs, but if someone chose to think about it in a different way, it could show up somewhere else. We've also gotten questions around the state about like, where's disability, where are the veterans, where's domestic violence? And that's probably going to be divided up a little bit depending on how they define that. Is it education? Is it a basic needs? Is it youth serving? So those are kind of all distributed among the categories there. Basic needs are, the safety net things: food, shelter, clothing, things that you need in order to stay in existence. Okay, so when we look at cause giving in the two regions and the state overall, we see that Central West Florida is more likely to give to basic needs, the environment, and youth causes than the state overall. So this is something that seems to be important to your particular region. And in fact, as I mentioned before, Central West Florida has the highest percentage of giving in the state to youth and environmental causes. Central West Florida is less likely to give to religion and education than the other regions in the state, and has the lowest percentage of giving in the state to both religion and international causes. Hillsborough County, however, is slightly different. They're more likely to give to youth and environmental causes than the state overall, and less likely to give to combined purposes. So maybe we see lower rates of United Way contributing here, other organizations like that, and the arts. Hillsborough is more likely to give to religion and less likely to give to basic needs, environment, and combined purposes than the region overall. All right, any other questions on the regional data? I see one about youth. Does youth include mentoring youth? I would say probably yes, unless they choose to define that as education, but I would assume it's probably mostly in the youth category. Any other questions on the regional data? Okay, great. Keep them coming. If anything pops into your mind, please feel free to share this in the chat. So based on all of this research, and as I said, the report has even more in there if you want to take a look at the full report, there are lots of opportunities ahead for us. I think the challenging part is always just recognizing that we have limited capacity as organizations and really trying to prioritize what we want to change, what we want to engage in. So we're going to share some of the opportunities that we think are important that come out of this survey, and look forward to any other interpretations that you all have as well. The first is that, really recognizing, but not all of it is dollars and not all of it is to formal nonprofit organizations. We see people giving their time, lending their voices to raise awareness, and bringing their networks along too. So expanding those 3 T's of time, talent, and treasure to the 5 T's to include ties and testimonies as well. We also have an opportunity to create a much more expansive and inclusive definition of philanthropy that allows all Floridians to participate, especially younger and more diverse donors. And we really, think about how to engage them in the work that we're doing currently in a way that's also going to move our mission forward. We see an increased interest in planned giving in this report. And as we come out of the pandemic, it's not just coming from older households, but from younger people as well. More Floridians are writing wills, and not all of them include a charitable gift. So the numbers right now that we have, 8% of Floridians have a will with a charitable bequest already in it. 16% of Floridians say they don't have a will, but if they did, they would consider a charitable bequest. So huge opportunity there. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a surprising link between younger respondents and giving via bequest. Among those who had a will, the most likely to leave a charitable bequest to an organization based in Florida were younger and more likely to be Hispanic or Black than the average respondent with a will. So we really need to kind of take away our preconceived notions about who would consider this opportunity and really think about planned giving as being a big opportunity for nonprofits and all of the donors that exist in our state. Floridians also care deeply about and are engaged in the environment. Of course, this is related to our geography and our incidence of natural disasters. But how do we build on that going forward? Can and should your organization address issues related to the environment or environmental justice, even if you're not an environmental organization? And I think we can ask the same question about racial justice as well. It doesn't have to be the only part of our mission to really think about the impact that we have on racial and social justice and environmental justice in our communities. And then finally, there are opportunities to improve communications and engagement in a way that can really build a strong and authentic relationship with donors of all types. 2 of the top 3 reasons that donors stopped giving was because they believed mismanagement of funds was happening, or that too much was being spent on administration and fundraising. And this is such a great opportunity for nonprofits to strengthen donor confidence and connect donor gifts to the mission and the impact that it has in the community. I know there's a little bit of a movement to change from talking about overhead to core mission investments, which I really like that phrasing of helping people kind of rethink about what it means to support every aspect of the organization in order to have the programmatic success that we all know that we need to have in order to achieve our missions. A diverse and active donor pool provides rich opportunities for nonprofit leaders, fundraisers, and everyone in the sector. So we should think about how we reduce barriers to giving and build a much more inclusive nonprofit sector. We need to pay attention to all the different ways donors are already choosing to give and how we meet them where they are, and build not only trust in the sector, but also meaningful opportunities to engage so that donors help drive that change. So that is what I brought for you today. Are there any other questions that I can answer before I turn it back over to Karina and Charlie? I see one in the chat. Are there specific ways givers 65 and older like to give, such as in-person events or online? We didn't ask about events specifically, but they are much more likely to mail you a check or make some sort of bank transfer than to give online if they're 65 or older. Compared to under 40 populations, which vastly prefer giving online. Now, we also know their gifts tend to be smaller. They're not giving as much. So there's got to be a balance there of what we provide. We still have to do both sides of those things. But really thinking about, who are your donors currently? What are their expectations? And how do we kind of give them what they're looking for? Keeping in mind that, once again, we don't have unlimited time or resources, or maybe even a staff person that's doing development work. So kind of balancing that out for our organization. How often will we do this research? Hi, Sarah Leonard. We are hoping to be able to do this every couple of years. This is the first time, so we're considering this kind of the benchmark study. This particular type of survey also has not been done very many places around the country. I think there's one for Puerto Rico, there's one for the city of Chicago, but there aren't a lot of state-to-state comparisons and being able to tell what's different about our state. The Giving USA data, which of course is national data, the preview came out last week. The full report is going to be out in a couple weeks, I believe. So we'll be able to tell at that point for 2021 what is different about Florida specifically and what has sort of changed in giving overall because of the pandemic and other external events. So we'll have a little bit better idea of comparison then. And how often are we hoping to repeat this? Depends on what we get funding for, but we're hoping, every couple of years we'll be able to refresh this and get a better look at what data looks like. All right, Karina, are there any questions I missed? I think I'm not keeping up very well.
I don't think you have missed any. Hold on, let's see. Did you get Charlie's any intel on a new federal office of nonprofits?
I don't have any intel on specifically what they would do with data. There are several organizations that are just tracking giving overall in the country, including the IRS. So no, I don't know what that new legislation, how that would affect this particular type of data. I think it's very exciting that might happen at the federal level. But the IRS, I think, has come up with a couple of things recently that are really interesting. Number one, that the universal charitable deduction that was offered the past 2 years actually was really powerful in getting people to give their charitable. So that was, any taxpayer could deduct up to a certain amount, depending on whether they were single or married. That actually did increase the amount of charitable contributions in the country. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case for 2022. They're not going to offer it, but something that we're working at the public policy level to see if that's something we can bring back in the future, because that did make a difference in how people decided to give their charitable dollars. The second thing that we're seeing is that charitable giving spiked in 2020 in response to the pandemic. What we see preliminarily so far is that for 2021, it dropped. It's still higher than 2019 pre-pandemic, but lower than 2020. So we're expecting that trend will probably continue, that 2022 will be a little bit lower than that until it kind of levels back out to where we were in 2019. So we'll see, but that's kind of the two big trends recently at the national level that we've come across. How to get in touch, I'm going to show my email address in just a minute, but would love to connect with anyone who has any questions about what we do or how we might be able to help you. And yes, we will be sharing the PowerPoint as well as the recording. So a couple questions here. This is my email address, as well as Sabine Perwaitz, who's our CEO. If you do have any questions about FNA or what we do, or membership opportunities, any of that stuff, please feel free to reach out or check our website first, flnonprofits.org. We're also on social media. And here's the link to the full report so that you can access it. If you go to our website, it's under research, but the actual link is right here. And so we hope this has been useful to you all as you do your daily work. If there's anything else we can help you with, please let us know. Thank you again to the Nonprofit Leadership Center, and we hope that we'll continue to interact with you all. We did just release our brand new compensation and benefit survey for the state. If that's something your organization is interested in, we're going to be doing our 2022 COVID effects research at the end of this year. So we hope you will all fill out that survey when you see that come across. And if there's anything else we can do, please let us know. We appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thank you so much, Leah. Does anybody have any last questions? We've got a few more minutes that we can stay on. It's 2:50 right now, so if there are any last questions, we're happy to take them. If not, then we can wrap up a bit early and everybody will have some bound time.
I had a question. I put it in the chat.
Oh, Sabrina, I'm sorry, we did not. I thought we got to that one. Leah, there is a question from Sabrina. How can this research help in nonprofits getting more funding?
So it's not a magic bullet, unfortunately. There's no like, here's the perfect solution. I think, the big takeaways for us were, what are those things that you can control that are keeping people from giving to you right now? So really thinking about how often you ask, how you're asking, how you recognize donors, all of that kind of goes into it. I think, really taking some time to consider the fact that some people are contributing to our communities in ways that's not cash-based. And so if they are doing that, if they're volunteering their time, if they're giving money to individuals, they're passionate about a cause, how can we connect with them as nonprofits and figure out how to bring them into our more formal charitable organization who's doing a lot of that work? We have so much expertise. We have so much experience. How do we make sure that people understand that we are a good place for them to put their charitable efforts into? So, that's going to look different for each organization, each community, and making sure that we're using messaging that matters to the people. What are those issues that are really important to donors in our community? And are we reflecting that in the work that we do? If you are doing racial justice movement work, are you talking about that? If you are doing environmental justice work, are you talking about that? Are we explaining how we spend our money? And are you explaining the impact that you have in your community? Because those are all things that donors are telling us are really important to them to be able to give. So yes, I think there's a lot in here that can help us be better fundraisers and better connectors to the community. But it's not quite as straightforward as like, do these 3 things and then the money will come in. I think we have to take a little bit of time at our own organization level, have the discussion with our staff and our board about how we use this information to do better fundraising going forward. Yes, and Charlie put a link to the NLC calendar as well. I know they do lots of fundraising training and incorporate all of this great information to you all. So you have the most up-to-date information and can use that.
Leah, we had a couple other questions come in while you were answering Sabrina's question. I'm not sure if these are things that you can speak to. One from Constance is, to get a survey, do you have to be a member?
No, so the COVID-19 survey is open to any nonprofit in the state. I think our one last year we had, oh gosh, don't quote me, about 1,200 nonprofits participate. The more, the better. It usually takes about 20 minutes to complete. So we'll be sharing that link with NLC so that they can share it with you all. And usually the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services also shares that with all of the registered nonprofits in the state. So that, like I said, should be out mid-October, beginning of October, mid-October, and will be open for 4 to 6 weeks. So you'll have a chance to fill it out then.
All right, and the last question we'll take is one from Kiara. And Kiara asks, how would you ask for donations? Could you do a speech and show them a business plan?
Yeah, I mean, you would want to make sure, depending on who your audience is, that you are getting their attention, right? So probably a multi-page business plan with a lot of text may not be the best first grab for them. But in general, when we look at fundraising, you want to look for individuals who are excited about your mission, have some sort of connection to your work, have been introduced, to what you do without being asked. And then once they're kind of in the fold and understand that, and that they're really interested in supporting you, then the ask comes after that. But yes, business plans, messaging, strategic plans, infographics, all of those things are great supporting documents to have in place as you look at how to fundraise for your organization. And once again, I highly recommend checking out NLC's calendar, because I know they do lots of information on this on a regular basis that really gets into the nuts and bolts of what the best fund development strategy would be for your organization. And I get I'll vouch for us too. Charlie just put the link in. I get their newsletter. It's fantastic. It's pretty, lots of information in it. So a great way to find out what's happening in the Tampa Bay region too.
Okay, so here we are rolling into 3 p.m., few minutes to go. Thank you so much, Leah, for your time today. Big thank you, everybody, to Leah McDermott for sharing this incredibly informative and timely presentation. Thank you to everyone that joined us today. We'll be sharing their recording and the slide deck when we post the recording. And the slide deck, as you saw, it includes Leah's contact information. It includes a link to the report if you didn't already grab it from the chat box. So we'll be posting those within the next week. Please reach out to us if you have any questions, and keep your eyes out for upcoming webinars. Have a great afternoon, everybody.